Well, welcome. I'm so excited to be sharing with you today about how to deal with that difficult person or persons in your life. Because we all have them, right? And this is such a big topic, and I'm going to just be covering some highlights today for you to consider. So thanks to one of my viewers for this great topic. And when we're done, if you could please share the video on your Facebook page just by hitting the share button below, or sending it to somebody that you know personally could benefit. Well, I can tell that there are some of you here already, but I'm not able to see who's here. So if you could, as you log on, if you could just say hi in the comments below, that'll let me know that you're here. So before I begin, I want to make clear that I'm really aware that everybody's situation is very different. And I'm not advising you or anything to do anything in particular. This is definitely not counseling, it's just information. And it's some things for you to consider that maybe you haven't before when dealing with that person in your life. So you may even find that you need someone to talk to personally to help you with your very personal and complicated perhaps situation. And if that's the case, I would really recommend that you meet with a licensed therapist who can really help you with what's going on. Well, here's a couple things to start with. We all have difficult people in our lives. Some people talk about it, some people don't, but we do. And, okay, this is the hard part. At times, we are all difficult people too in someone else's lives, because we're human, right? We're all human. So it's important to me to make clear that I don't want to label, quote, the difficult person as bad. They are struggling in their lives and suffering, and perhaps making poor choices. At times when you're going through really difficult things, it's easy to be self-focused and really not even be aware of how what's going on in their life is actually flowing over into yours. So we don't want to label that as bad, but it is something that does affect you, and so we want to have really healthy strategies for dealing with that. Well, we experience people that we care about in our lives as difficult when we see them make choices in their lives that are harmful to them or others and scares us, frankly. We see them as difficult when they interact with us in ways that are hurtful or painful. We also experience them as difficult when they don't interact with us, when they pull back or won't communicate or cut off. That's very hard. The person that we're talking about is dealing with very difficult things in their life, which may or may not even be their doing. It might be they're just going through a very, very hard time, have lots of needs, and may not be aware of you in that process. We also find them to be difficult when they don't respond to our attempts to love them or to reason with them, explain things, or when we give them a second, third, fourth, ongoing chances. And it's hard when we see that person perhaps not be proactive in their lives to make changes where needed. Changing their situation, turning to God, getting support, making difficult changes and choices, or getting treatment. I mean, the list goes on. But when we don't see them being proactive, it's very hard. And that affects us, okay? It's not happening in a vacuum. It affects us greatly. And we experience distress when our efforts to get through to them are ignored or rejected. We're trying to help in ways that we feel like are important that maybe they can't even see. We experience distress when we see things worsen in their lives or in our relationship with them. It's also really hard when it's unclear, this is a big one, whether they have control over what they're struggling with or not. It's actually much harder to deal with someone if you know that they could be doing something differently, but they're not, versus they actually can't. Their situation is such that at this moment there's not a whole lot they can do. So whether it's a can't or a won't is very, very important. It's also painful. I see some people checking in, so that's wonderful. It's also hard when they won't let us give input or advice or just thoughts on how to solve the problem that they're dealing with. And I know it's hard to get advice for sure, but it's hard on the other end too, when you feel like maybe from your own experience or a bigger picture that you have something that would help. And it's also painful when we miss them. We miss them terribly, or at least the them that we used to know. And it's hard when we see the future perhaps without them, like the future that we thought we'd have with them slipping away, and even relationships that are connected to them, like if it's a child you're dealing with and it's going to affect grandchildren, your relationship with grandchildren. So dreams that we've had when that person is struggling, it affects our dreams as well and the future that we thought we would have with them. And of course it's really difficult when we are negatively affected financially or relationally, emotionally and spiritually by what is going on with them, and a whole lot more. That's just a few. I'm sure I missed a ton. So as you can see, it's a very complicated situation, and it's super easy to be confused about, like, how do you love them? How do I show compassion to them? How do I set boundaries? And so I'm hoping today will help you with that. Well, as I give information about that, how to do those things, I want to start with the whole concept of self-care, because I'm going to talk briefly about it, because caring for ourselves while caring for that challenging person in our lives is of the utmost importance. And I have a whole chapter in my book, it's actually chapter 6, on self-care and boundaries and how important it is. Self-care is essentially listening to and responding to your needs in healthy ways. And there's a really big difference between being selfish and practicing self-care, because sometimes people get confused about that. Being selfish means that you're only considering your needs without considering the needs of others. On the other end, codependency happens when we only consider the needs of the other person without considering our needs too. So we're looking for healthy self-care. It's a balance of being a steward of yourself and your God-given needs while also being aware of the needs of others. So that's what we're going for, healthy self-care in the middle, which is definitely a form of self-compassion. Well, so first we started with self-care. Second, we're actually to do what we can to protect ourselves from negative influences. One of my favorite verses is Proverbs 4:23, and it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Another translation says, flows the well springs of life. So we are to protect our hearts, okay? And it doesn't just mean eating healthy, I don't mean just that, but protecting the emotional impact and the spiritual impact of our hearts by what we go through and what we're dealing with in our lives. So guarding our hearts includes limiting or stopping negative influences that tear us down, both from ourselves as well as from others. So today we're talking about how to love and have compassion for that difficult person in your life, while at the same time taking care of yourself in that process. Now, of course, super important is, well, is this biblical? Like, what does God have to say about this? Now, I have to tell you, I have a secret weapon in my disposal, and that is my husband, Dave, has a PhD in biblical theology, and he's a Bible scholar. And I'm telling you, you could ask him anything and he knows where it is. It's stunning and amazing. So I really have a benefit when I'm going through things of being able to run things by him. In fact, when I was writing Give Yourself a Break, Turning Your Inner Critic into a Compassionate Friend, I made sure that I ran all the biblical parts by him. And one of the things I cover in that chapter 6 is that he shared with me the concept of stewardship. And stewardship is one of the basic elements in the New Testament teaching. Christians are to be good stewards of everything that God has given us, which is everything, okay? And so the stewardship principle explains why we should avoid all damage to ourselves if possible. For example, the Bible actually says that we should run away from persecution if possible and not volunteer for mistreatment. Though there are exceptions to this in the Bible, to this general rule. And actually, when we're done, I'll put those exceptions in the comments for any of you that want to know about those. The hint is they're in extremely special circumstances, not in our everyday life. So God wants us to be good stewards of what He's given us. And really, we're very good about applying that principle to the things and people that God has given us in our lives. You know, our possessions, our family, our ministry, our job, our friends, all of that, okay? But unfortunately, for whatever reason, we don't tend to apply this principle to being a good steward of ourselves. And so being a good steward of ourselves involves caring for our minds, bodies, spirits, and emotional health. And this includes nurturing ourselves as well as protecting ourselves from harm. Sometimes we need to set boundaries because we feel taken advantage of or harmed by another person, and we need to set boundaries about that. Sometimes we have to set boundaries because we simply just can't do more for a person because of our own limitations or because of all the other responsibilities in our life, even if that person is incredibly grateful for what we're doing. They're not taking advantage of us, but sometimes we just don't have it to give. We're finite beings with a limited amount of energy and time and focus and money and all kinds of things. So setting boundaries, though, with that person who might be tearing you down or depleting you is super important. Allowing people in your life who criticize you or harm you actually causes great damage to your soul and your self-esteem, and that's definitely not guarding our hearts. So consider advocating for yourself in those kinds of situations the way you would for a friend who was being harmed or taken advantage of. Well, as we know, this human life, there is no way to completely remove difficult people from our lives. That's impossible. That's kind of how it is, and like I said, we're difficult at times too. But my point today is to make sure that you consider yourself in the equation too. Dealing with a difficult person can wear you down, and it can actually rob you of many of the good things in your life. You simply are not enjoying or partaking of a lot of good things because of being over-involved with that person. Many people, of course, really have trouble setting boundaries. They fear it because of not wanting to disappoint the other person, not wanting to hurt feelings, or have others mad at you, or even a potential loss of that relationship if you were to set boundaries. So I totally understand how difficult it is. I also understand how damaging it is to not do that. So I'm going to start just by saying, hey, what is a boundary? Let me define what a boundary is, because people get really confused about this. So a boundary is actually not telling the other person what to do. Like, you'd better do this or else. That's like a threat or a statement. Okay, that's not a boundary. A boundary is actually saying what you will do and not do in a certain situation. So it's actually about you speaking for yourself, caring for yourself in that way. And there's lots of ways to do that. So one is just by what you say. So let's say you do have somebody who's ragging on you and being really harsh with you. You could say, you know what, I can tell that you are upset with me about something, and I would be happy to talk with you about it, but not if you're going to criticize and yell at me or put me down. So just decide, see if you can calm yourself down and speak to me with respect. Otherwise, for now, that conversation is over and we could try again later. So you can set a boundary by stating through what your words, what you say. Also by what you do. Removing yourself from damaging situations. So in the above situation, let's say the person just keeps yelling or putting you down, then you can leave that situation. It doesn't have to be some big thing. It can just be, you know, this isn't working out. I think I need to go now. And that may sound simplistic and, you know, may not work in every situation. But my bringing that up is more to say, to realize that you do have, oftentimes we feel trapped, like we don't have choices. And we actually do have choices other than just taking it or tolerating situations. Sometimes it takes a lot of strength to do that, but we do in fact have choices. We also can set boundaries by what you don't do. So for instance, let's say you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to make excuses for that other person anymore. I'm not going to agree to do things that are against my belief or my moral values. And I'm not going to stay in interactions that actually harm me. So you can make a boundary, and it may not even be something you say to the other person, it's something you do with yourself. You can also set a boundary by what you offer and don't offer. For instance, you might say, I would be happy to take you to the grocery store and buy some food for you, but I'm unwilling to give you cash or a gift card. And maybe that's if you're concerned that person would use it for drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or something that you feel like is obviously clearly not good for them, and what they really need is nutrition. And but that's not manipulating them. They could certainly say, no, I don't want to do that, but that's saying that's what I would feel comfortable doing. You could say, I'd be happy to watch the kids or take you to an appointment once a week. They want you to do it every day, but unless it's an extreme situation, I'm not talking about those kinds of things, but that person is not taking responsibility for their life, and they're wanting you to solve their problems. But you could set a boundary and say, hey, I'd be happy to do this amount, okay? But I want to tell you that covering detailed strategies for doing this is beyond the scope of today, what I can share with you. But I did want to leave you with 2 resources you can check out if you'd like. They're both by the authors of Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And the first one is just a very, very famous book called Boundaries, Integrating Our Faith and Boundaries. Really, really good. Very practical, very helpful. And another one is How to Have That Difficult Conversation. And that is a great book that takes you through how to have hard conversations, how to prepare yourself, how to look at the fact that you don't do that. Finding out what is it in me that's stopping me from advocating for myself, plus a whole lot more. So both of those are really, really good with helping you prepare yourself, understanding maybe why you have trouble setting boundaries, and helps equip you to do so. So those are ones you could check out. So remember, progress in this area comes a little bit at a time. It's hard to change a pattern, but if that pattern you have with the difficult person in your life is really, really harming you, and in some ways might even be causing them to not grow, which I'll get to in just a sec, it's important to change that in the ways that you can, and it can be really small. For instance, I would say every single one of you that's watching this, either now or later, is you're already on that path because you're considering ways to care for yourself as you relate to this difficult person in your life. So good for you, you already started. All right, so I'm just going to leave you with a couple of points to think about, all right? 1, we don't like this one, okay? But number 1, you don't have control over that other person. You can't make them do what you feel is the right thing. Even if it is, quote, the right thing, you don't have control over them. They're an individual person, okay? However, number 2, you do have control over you. You have control over how much you give the other person, how much you take care of yourself, how you set boundaries. You have control over you, okay? 3, we need to seek wisdom from God. Seek Him and ask Him what is healthy for you in the situation. He will help you figure out, as well as talking with others who are skilled in the area or have experience with this kind of thing, what would be healthy and what wouldn't, and help you with the courage it takes to care for yourself while you're dealing with a difficult person. And then 4, sometimes the best way to love a person is to actually limit what you do for them, so that they have an opportunity to face reality and hopefully grow from it. Because what happens is when we do too much for people, it's working for them. They don't feel any need to change or grow because you're the one who's handling this and doing this and bailing them out of this. And so sometimes when we do too much, we don't mean to, but we actually hinder their growth. And then 5, don't hesitate to get help for yourself in your situation. As I'm talking, I'm very aware that certain things I'm saying would apply to you, but probably wouldn't in other ways. So don't hesitate to get some help, to have a place for you to process things. And one of the things often is learning to grieve all that you'd hope for with that person or in that particular area of their life. Doesn't have to be complete, but help yourself process emotion so that you can get to a better place yourself. Because those kinds of things really affect us, and it really helps to talk to somebody about that. And then number 6, take time to listen to yourself about this topic. So I'm going to share just a couple questions that you can listen to. And the beauty of this Facebook Live is you can go back and listen to it again whenever you want. So here's a few questions to ask yourself. What interactions with this particular person are causing you frustration and harm? And just write them down. What are they specifically? Okay? And how do you notice that in yourself? Like, do you find yourself becoming angry a lot or irritable? You have a very low frustration tolerance. You're exhausted. You feel resentful, always busy, stressed, depressed, anxiety, taken advantage of, whatever that is. Notice, how do you feel that in yourself, in your body, and just in your whole spirit? And then think about, what are you willing to do or give without resentment? So I'm going to share something with you. The first book that I wrote was actually a self-published version, and I included this principle in there, but it didn't make its way into the next one just because of space. So it's called The Fredrickson Line of Resentment, is what it is. And of course, I came up with this because of my own issue in trying to find that line. So I'm going to show you with my hands, okay? So pretend that you've got a long line, and on this line, you're listing in your mind all the things that you're doing for this person. So you think, okay, I can do this for them. No, I don't feel resentful doing that. Like, that's okay. And I can do this, and I can do that, and that. Then you realize, wait a minute, right about here, right here, put a line on it, on this line, okay? Put a line, like, okay, anything after this point, I feel resentful about. I feel bitter, I feel taken advantage of. And so my encouragement to you is, think about your line of resentment, and only do things that are on this side of that line, okay? Don't do things that are on the other, because they're really not a gift to the other person. You feel harmed, and they feel that resentment. And think about for yourself, where is that point where I'm really fine giving this? Like, this is something, a gift of love, but boy, when it gets to be here, it's too much. So think about, what can I give without being resentful? And then ask yourself, what are you not doing to care for yourself because of your involvement with this person? Okay, think about that. And then, kind of related to that, what has fallen by the wayside for you? Has your health suffered? Have you not been able to care for yourself in healthy eating or exercise, or time to rest, time with friends, doing things that you enjoy? Think about what has gone by the wayside. And then ask yourself this question: what do you need to recover or heal from the effects of dealing with that difficult person in your life, especially if it's been a very long time? And, a situation would be where, let's say you were helping someone who was seriously ill or something like that, and they're better now, or the situation has changed. And I'm not saying they were a difficult person, they needed help, okay? But even when that situation has changed, it will take a while for you to heal and recover. Yeah, it could be up to a year, honestly. So don't be surprised if you're not just bouncing back when that situation has actually changed and isn't happening anymore. It takes a while to recuperate, and that's normal. All right, so I've got a few statements you can say to yourself about caring for yourself as a good steward, okay? So I'm going to say them as if I'm saying them to myself, and you can say them to you, all right? So here we go. Wow, I never knew that I'm called to be a steward of myself. In some ways, it makes sense, but it actually seems so new. I haven't really heard people talk about that. But you know what? I want to learn how to do this. And it feels good to know that actually God wants me to be a good steward of myself. The fact that He sees me as valuable and worthy of kindness and compassion and care makes a big difference to me. And I'm realizing that I matter too in this equation, and I can learn other ways to care for myself and set boundaries while still helping other people. And I want to remind myself every day, I am worthy of respect, kind treatment, and protection from the negative influences of others as well as from myself. So I'm hoping that what I've shared today has been encouraging to you and helps you care for yourself as you work with the difficult person in your life. And for more information, you can always visit my website, which is kimfredrickson.com, and learn about my blog and my book, and I have a CD of self-compassionate statements you can say to yourself And again, if you could share the link on your page, and also, this is new, I haven't asked this before, but if you feel like it, if you could share what was helpful to you below. It doesn't have to be long or anything. That would help me, honestly, because it's so classic. A lot of times I'll prepare something and I don't really necessarily realize that this particular part was helpful. Like, I'm always surprised, but it helps me know what's helpful to you so that I can do more of that. So I plan to be back next Friday with a new topic. So you take care, have a good weekend, and thank you so much for joining me today, either live or later on.